Hello and welcome to this episode of How to Start, Grow and Monetize Your Podcast with me, James Burtt, and him, the popreneur, Alex Chisnall. Today we're talking about how to monetize your podcast before you launch it. Before you even launch it.
No.
That's
Can you
right.
do that?
You absolutely can do that.
Wow.
And we're going to tell you how. How would you do it, Al?
I don't know. I'll tell you how to do it. So we'll cover a couple of things here. We'll talk about getting sponsorship and brand deals before you launch.
Before you start, yeah.
We'll talk about maybe starting a membership like a Patreon. You might not know what Patreon is, but we'll tell you a little bit about that. And the third one could be?
Memberships for more information, not Patreon. I've got one.
And trickle-down.
Oh, and trickle-down. Oh, that could be considered trickle-down.
Okay.
So that's like 0.3, 0.2, 3.1. So you can actually monetize your content before you even go live with it. Now, a lot of people think that in the world of podcasting, you've got to have numbers, you've got to have data. And in the majority of instances, let's be real, that is what sponsors are going to want to know. They're going to want to know how many listeners you're getting, what's your reach, how many impressions is it getting, what does it get across socials, they're going to want to know your social media handles, etc., etc. We've just done this for a big celebrity podcast that we're dealing with. And they wanted to know the ins and outs of a duck's arse, quite frankly. Like, what's the reach? What's the audience? What's the impression? What's the drop-down rate? What's the click-through rate? They wanted to know all of that stuff.
What the guys did?
Yeah, not the people involved in the podcast,
right.
but the sponsors who are going to potentially sponsor the podcast. Because if you haven't got a show already up and running and you haven't got data, so you can't act on fact, then you have to look at the wider sort of brand of that podcast rather than just the data. But we know examples where people have only launched shows because brands have already gone to them and approached them in advance and said, we'd love you to do this show, or we've heard you're doing this show, can we sponsor it? You know, a very good example had a massive car brand in Europe, didn't they?
Yeah, like would be my favourite brand, to be honest with you, personally. Podcast in Europe.
Skoda, he loves a Skoda.
Loves a Skoda. Skoda. That's how you say it. And they literally started recording their podcast, didn't have any sponsors. I was chatting to them, didn't realise, again, that they could get, this podcast sponsored with a brand deal before they went live. So they went after it. And, my advice was, look at your existing network, look at who is once removed from your network, who can give you an introduction, and think about what types of brands that you think are natural bedfellows. I love that phrase, natural bedfellows with your podcast. So a specific car brand would fit in with their podcast, which is interviewing people of interest, I would say, celebrities to a degree who've moved to another country, who are expats, got a bit of money because they can afford to do that. So they've got themselves a marquee car brand, I would say. And, you look at the size of that deal, if you multiply that by 12 months, that is slap bang in the middle of around 50 grand a year for your first podcast deal.
With no data, that'll do, isn't it?
Split 2 ways for the co-hosts.
That's right, isn't it?
Pay what it costs for the studio, the editing, if you're going down that route. Still nice, it's pretty healthy pocket money. That was a funny voice, wasn't it?
It was a healthy pocket money. You talked about their memberships as well as another great sort of trickle-down revenue thing. And you could have this all set up in advance. So the most popular one in the podcast is Patreon, which effectively is almost like think of it like a gated community. So you would normally give something of value to that listening audience and they would get some more stuff and they pay for it. Now, Patreon, you're normally charging very small amounts of money. You're charging, £3 to 10 quid, something like that, or $3 to $15 if you're listening in the United States. But you've got to give, the key with this, right, is that you've got to give something of enough value that someone would exchange money with you. Now, you do get a lot of podcasts where people just want to support them. But again, they normally have already got a big extended,
Don't start me
wide reach.
Buy me a coffee.
No, the buy me a coffee thing is horrible. Oh, I can't stand it. But you've got to give them something of value. So again, a lot of the very basic ones will do like early access or ad-free listening. Is that enough of a hook? I'm not really sure that it is, but equally...
Exclusive content.
That's what you've really got to do.
Behind the scenes, our behind the scenes is like triple platinum.
Guys, if you'd like some behind the scenes, just DM the word behind to Alex Chisnall.
Behind.
I just want to see how many messages of behind that we get.
I was going to say, but if they actually saw our behind the scenes action, we were sea dipping in sandbanks.
Double sea dipped
in the sun.
We've set up an entire studio in what I can only describe as a beautiful holistic wellness centre at the bottom of Chisnall's garden.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm hoping to get a massage. He said, do you want a massage? I was like, I don't think I do, but thanks for asking. Just wanted to take a quick minute to say a big thank you for watching this podcast. If you are thinking about starting your own podcast to grow your brand or your business, then we would love to help you out. Yourpodcastcourse.com is a place where you can find 55 on-demand videos. There's trainings, there's blueprints, there's guides, there's cheat sheets, there's downloads. Everything that you need to utilize and to start your own powerful podcast is in there right now.
It's guaranteed for 7 days. So if you don't like it, we'll return your money, and we're going to start you off with a fantastic offer.
Absolutely. Just because you are consuming this podcast for a limited time only, for the first 25 people only this is going to be, we're going to give you 50% off yourpodcastcourse.com. Click the link that's in the show notes. There's information there, and it will be 50% off joining the course. As I say, we will walk you through how to start, how to grow, how to monetize your podcast. We'll talk to you about artwork, setup, names, ideal listener profiles, how to get the ideal guest, how you do the interviews, how you do the 14-day launch process, everything you need to utilize and to know to create a powerful podcast. We will tell you. We've done it 400 plus times. We have done some of the most successful podcast launches in Europe at this point in time, and the exact strategy and process that we charge tens of thousands of pounds to our agency clients for, you can get access to through yourpodcastcourse.com. 50% off for a limited time only. Click the link in the show notes now. Cheers! But you can do this stuff in advance. The other thing you can do is subscribers. So you can get subscribers, and again, they will get early access. You can roll that through Apple these days, and there's some other platforms where you can do it. Don't forget though, with Apple, as it stands at the moment, if you monetize content through Apple, Apple take Apple tax, and they will charge you 30% of any revenue. Yes, 30%.
So an extra 10 on what most people would charge, basically.
Yeah, basically. So there is a court case that's going through at the moment. There's a big battle going through. But what?
When you're in court?
When am I in court? Yeah. Excuse me, Apple, I'd like my £5.50 back. I know Spotify have taken them to court.
Have they?
Yeah, they've done a class action lawsuit because basically, if you have an app and you do any form of monetization directly through the app on iOS, they take 30% of that.
They do, yes. Sorry, I know exactly.
Which is really difficult.
For all apps.
Yeah. So if for example, you have free Spotify, then you go, I want to upgrade. If you do it in the app, then effectively 15%, 30% of your $15 or whatever it is for a Spotify account is given directly to Apple. So they're getting 5 out of £15 in essence.
Wow.
So, which is why they try and bounce you through to an external platform to make you buy directly through their website instead. And that's what they're trying to get through. But so effectively, if you put a £10 subscriber charge on your content, just beware that you're going to get charged £3 in every 10.
So you can price it accordingly.
Yeah, price it accordingly. But you can't outprice it to a certain extent. Like I pay $10 a month for Wondery Plus. That's the only subscription that I have for podcasts, because they have got genuine exclusive content and they let you binge new series instead of it drip feeding each week. They put out the 6 episodes at the same time. So for me, that's and I've been paying that for 3 years now, so they've had 350 quid off me. So lifetime value of a customer or client is quite good, but they're having to give me a lot of extended value. Like I wouldn't pay that just to get it a day early. I wouldn't get it to have it ad free, because I'm not that bothered about the adverts. I'll just skip through them, or I'll actually listen to them, because weirdly I like listening to podcast adverts because I like finding out how people are doing the adverts. So that's one sort of monetization and membership.
And if you'd like to have a little cheeky look at what the most successful people who are making money in that way, then go to a platform called Graphtreon, GRAPHTREON.com. That's graphtreon.com. Choose the type of creator you want, and the most popular is podcasters. They are making the most money from having subscription membership sites, and it will literally show you what the podcast is. You can select paid as one of the drop downs. So you've got the free option, you know, how many followers they've got.
Yeah. Just pulling the data out of Patreon, isn't it?
It's exactly that. Yeah. Pulling the data out of Patreon and telling you how many paid members they've got, how much money they're making per month, how much more money they're making this year than last year, etc. And some of the numbers on that are astronomical.
I remember you showed me. I was
Six figures a month.
Yeah.
A month.
Yeah.
And yes, those are the biggest shows, but we've all got to start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so why wouldn't you want to start something like that? I would say the warning, a red flag would be when you're starting out with the podcast, do you want to give yourself more work to do? I.e., do you want to be documenting behind the scenes stuff? Do you want to be creating exclusive content?
Yeah.
So it's an example for you. You might have a small team, you might have a big team, and you might think this is a fantastic way to monetize the audience that we've already got, that we're going to be pulling from Instagram, YouTube, and pulling them into an audio platform.
Yeah.
So, you know, horses for courses.
Final point on that scared the bloody life out of me. Final point on this, and we're talking about subscription membership models there, but the other monetization model that I think works really well is memberships, but for the service that you provide, and get it set up in advance. So let's say, for example, I used to do a podcast called Building the Brand. I could have quite easily had a branding course or a branding membership.
Podcast, mate?
I just got too busy trying to knock about with you and do podcasts with you and stuff. And it was just too, you know, I value my time with you over the time spent on that podcast. No, I've never regretted it since, really. But I could have had an extended course on, you know, on branding, for example, from the get-go, so that anyone who's a listener can then go through and subscribe to that. For effectively, we've done exactly that with this podcast here. Start, Grow, Monetize started out as a podcast, as a lead generation tool, to a membership site, and now we've shifted it slightly, but you can now We tweaked it. We pivoted. But you can now go and check out yourpodcastcourse.com. No, you can't nick someone else's jingle.
Okay.
But that effectively, that is a way to monetize this podcast indirectly, that trickle-down revenue. So it hasn't come directly through the podcast, but it's come as a direct result of the podcast. And again, a lot of people, when they get started, they want to go, how do I get... I did a conversation literally yesterday with someone. How do I get a sponsor? You don't bloody need a sponsor. You're a consultant expert who charges $6,000 a month to look after people. Land one client.
Yeah, I
just land one client.
Same conversation the day before you had your conversation.
Yeah.
It was just like, okay, so you are the thought leader in this particular space in your industry. You were talking about sponsorships and brand deals. I'm like, you just want to get a client by talking about your thing on your podcast, creating all of the assets that you can use to promote that through your newsletter, through all your social media channels, through your live events. You don't need anything else. No. You just need that one thing. And for me, that happened accidentally with my original podcast, Screw It, Just Do It. And it was a conversation I had with an American entrepreneur, and it was after we'd finished recording and we were just chatting afterwards, and he was just like something like he was unhappy with the agency who was looking after his podcast, you know, something like, so when do you think this will, you know, he was like, when do you think this will come out, you know, that kind of a conversation afterwards. I was telling him, and then I said, because my team will do this, and he was like, you've got a team? I was like, yeah, this is what I do, we make podcasts. He was like, I didn't know that. Oh, could you send me your deck? And I'd be interested in your pricing, because we're really not happy with our agency. They really keep dropping loads of balls. And I was like, what if I mentioned this on every podcast that I did? So
the example I gave to the person yesterday, and I didn't get annoyed with them, but I said, but you talk about sponsorship here. How much do you think you would be able to get? Because if you, and I know that he charges $6,000 a month per client. I said, even if your podcast gave you one client a month, that's $72,000 a year.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's a pretty good living for a lot of people. $72,000, that's a pretty good living from one podcast, and that could pay for the team around the podcast and still give you a nice chunk of change. So don't think you need a massive show to monetize. Don't think that you need to wait until you've got a big audience to monetize. You can get started at the very beginning.
We know a couple of people who make six figures a year from having podcasts that do less than
10,000 downloads a month. Let's put it that way.
Way less than that.
Yeah. But they serve a very specific niche in a very, very specific sector, and it works. You can monetize your podcast, guys, even with small audiences and even from the very get-go. If you're thinking, though, I don't know how to start, James, Alex, please help me. How can I do this?
You can do that.
You can have our information in your eyes and in your ears. I don't know where I was going with that.
Why would you want that?
Why would you not want it? Yourpodcastcourse.com, and you can find 55 on-demand videos. There's cheat sheet, blueprints, downloads, guides. It is literally the system that me and Al have used to launch 400 plus successful podcasts for clients around the world, actors, athletes, celebrities, influencers, all that kind of good stuff. And it's the exact same strategies and processes that we talk you through in that course. Yourpodcastcourse.com. Click the link in the show notes and you can go straight there now. And we'll see you on the next episode of How to Start, Grow and Monetize Your Podcast.